Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Kelly here with Esri and I'd like to thank you for joining us for our webinar today. So today we're going to be discussing deployable apps for aviation authorities and airports. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our first presenter today, Jonathan Weaver.
Thank you, Kelly. And thank you everyone for joining us. I'm excited about today's webinar. In previous webinars that we've delivered, we focused on workflow-based solutions for obstacle assessment and aeronautical cartography. Now, those are important requirements for civil aviation that need to be fulfilled. However, in this particular webinar, we're actually going to focus on how to leverage some of that value to your users and stakeholders. Again, my name is Jonathan Weaver. I manage our global aviation business development for Esri, and today I'm joined by Summer Wolf, who works in our professional services division. She actually puts a lot of these applications together and delivers those to our customers. So, if you have joined us in some of those previous webinars, you've seen this particular slide. For aviation organizations, they tend to follow this pattern of collecting information or integrating with other systems to analyze the data and really make sense of it. They then produce different information products, ultimately sharing that information across the organization or even perhaps externally. For the most part, in those previous webinars, we've focused on the top half of this slide, to collect, analyze, and produce. I think one of the biggest strengths of ArcGIS is really in that bottom half and on the produce side. So the ability to connect people with data really to make informed decisions. Another way to look at it is with these three systems. First, we have a system of record in the lower left-hand corner, system of record or system of record keeping. This is all of the transactional data management. And then secondly, there's a system of insights. These are the analytics, our ability to be able to make sense and understand all of the geographic information that we have. And then the third system is that system of engagement. These are the apps and maps that really connect people to the information and in a way that allows them to tell stories with the different information products. And it's that third system that we're really going to focus in on today. How can we create that system of engagement through apps that are easily deployed? And when I say easily deployed, I'm talking about no coding required. It's about a configure-first approach to deploying these types of applications. So what kind of applications can you deploy without coding? First, there are dashboards. Many of you may have seen the Johns Hopkins dashboard on the COVID count cases that's really has taken off since the start of the pandemic rather. At one point, this particular dashboard was actually receiving, I think, upwards of 1 billion hits per day. So this is all hosted on ArcGIS Online, very scalable to meet the demands of organizations. There's other dashboards for airfield inspections, obstacle assessment, and we're going to dig into those as part of the demonstration. And then we have field applications like those that support the airfield inspections, like Survey 123, a form-based application that's deployed to a mobile device. So staff can actually take that into the field, collect some information, and then we can report back on that information through some of the dashboards as well. And then in the lower right-hand corner, web applications, we're starting to see organizations like LVNL in the Netherlands deploy these, the Japanese Civil Aviation Bureau, whether it's a chart viewer or an ETOD viewer to see the obstacle surface areas. Even Air has deployed some very interesting applications as far as volcanic activity and doing some prediction and forecasting of ash clouds to really understand how volcanic activity can impact airspace. And then in the upper right-hand corner, perhaps one of my favorites is the ability to communicate some of this information through story maps. That really provides organizations with the ability to outreach to the community, like this particular one that is focused in on in Denver, Colorado, just outside of Denver where I live, where there's been a substantial amount of noise complaints. And so it was a way that the community, that the local government was able to provide information to the community in terms of, well, here's the impact, the true impact of aviation within your community. These are where the noise complaints are happening. So it's a really effective way to connect with citizens in the community or your stakeholders. So how do we build some of these applications? We really have 3 different experiences for building some of these apps. Actually, even more if you start to dig into some of the dashboards and Survey 123 forms, things like that. But one is the web app builder. So this is probably one of the most popular ones, and there's been millions of apps deployed using web app builder over the last few years. And then the second one is what we consider a next generation web app builder, which is experience builder. This is actually going to be able to integrate things like Survey 123 into the web application, creating a rich 2D and 3D experience. It's built on the JavaScript API, so it's going to be a little bit more performant as well. And then the third application builder is what we call App Studio. And this allows users to build cross-platform native mobile apps that ultimately could be distributed within your company or even published to some of the app stores. So before you go off and start deploying various types of applications, there's certain things that you really need to consider in terms of prioritizing your approach. There needs to be a business need, a question that needs to be answered through GIS. For example, if there was an incident that requires a shutdown of the airport, do you know how many aircraft passengers en route within 10 minutes of arrival? Another example is, why is there a large number of wildlife sightings at the east end of a runway? So if there's a question that needs to be asked, oftentimes with the location component, we can answer that through different types of application. Secondly, there needs to be a clear business need, benefit and value that the app is actually bringing. And then finally, how easy is it to deploy or launch? And so we have this matrix, and it seems rather simple and almost common sense, but it's good to kind of plot out the different types of applications that you're considering and figure out where it actually lands within this. So looking at the x-axis, the ease of launch from more of the customization end to start with, all the way to configuring. So if it's really easy to launch, you're focusing on the configuration component. That's the area where there's not going to be a lot of coding. And then if you look at the y-axis, the value and benefits it brings to the organization. Is it low? Is it high? And so out of this quad, you really want to focus in on the upper right hand. So you want to aggressively embrace those projects that are easy to launch, that are bringing clear business value and benefits to the organization. And there's other areas that you might want to embrace cautiously or even experiment around with. But obviously, anything that's going to require heavy customization, that's not really bringing any benefit to the organization, you want to avoid that. At the end of the day, you want to be able to mitigate any kind of implementation risks, deliver high business value, and ultimately increase adoption. What was it? The network effect that really states the more users and participants of a good and service brings more value of that good or service as well. Okay, and then finally, in terms of the slides, at least, I want to hit on ArcGIS Hub. So you can think of this as an extension to ArcGIS Online. It's a system for collaboration and engagement that really empowers your stakeholders with a lot of the GIS capabilities. It's about creating transparency, stakeholder management, and engagement. We do that with things like open data. Here in the United States, the FAA has embraced this open data concept and has published a lot of their charting information through an open data portal. There's concepts like initiatives that allow you to build websites, include apps and maps, give you the ability to organize your stakeholders into teams. Now, ArcGIS Hub, we've seen Hub environment really become essential in supporting a lot of the COVID-19 efforts by local and national governments around the world. It really has been a way to improve the communication with the governments, with their citizens, and really involve the citizens into the process as well. So now we're actually going to switch over into demonstration. The demonstration is going to be broken down into 4 distinct parts. We're going to focus in on airport inspections more from the usability standpoint, not actually configuring. You'll see a dashboard. We'll see how Survey 123 feeds into that. Then we'll look at configuring a dashboard for obstacle assessment in the evaluation process. And then we'll look at building out an aeronautical chart viewer. And then I'm going to pass it over to Summer, who's going to build out a hub site for us. So with that, I'm going to move over to my web browser here. And really first, what we're going to look at is ArcGIS Online. That's what we have up on the screen right here. This is a web-based GIS. It's hosted by Esri. It's delivered as a SaaS, software as a service. It's really going to allow you to create, organize, and manage all of your geographic information really in this one system. So it's scalable, it's secure, and really you can have something like this up and running within minutes. You could almost look at ArcGIS Online as an ability for your staff, your employees to do self-service mapping. So like I said, the ability to search content, the ability to organize it into groups, and at the end of the day, actually creating content and sharing that to the rest of your stakeholders. Now, within ArcGIS Online, you have components that in many ways could be looked at as extensions to ArcGIS Online. So for example, dashboards, Survey 123, Hub, and we're going to take a look at various parts of all of these. But first, I'm going to start with dashboards. So I'm going to click on the dashboards. We're going to come into the dashboards. I've got a handful of dashboards already created. Let's go ahead and view this Denver Airport Inspections dashboard. So this particular dashboard is giving us operational insight into the inspection process at Denver International Airport. We've broken this down into different distinct parts. Of course, we've got our mapping component, which is in the center of the screen. We've got a pie chart that shows us kind of the distribution of observations that have been recorded by runway. And then you have observations by type. The nice thing about dashboards is you can make this interactive with the map and with other controls as well. So for example, if I click on runway observations, I can quickly filter out the content of the map to see only those runway observations. Or if I want to look at the wildlife hazards, I can do that. You can also see in the observation list that it's filtering that data set down as well. Other areas, we've got operations staff. Where's our operations that are currently working and conducting some of the inspections on the airfield? We can get real-time information regarding their location. And then just again, kind of breaking down some of the issues regarding runways. So what I want to do now is actually shift over to my iPad, and I'm going to take the role of an operations staff that's going out into the field and actually conducting an inspection. So what I'm going to do is use Survey 123 for this. And I have multiple forms that are actually already established, but the one I'm interested in is the daily airfield inspection. So I'm going to go out and actually collect some information. It's pretty early in the morning here. We'll call it a pre-flight inspection. And I'll go ahead and inspect the runways, maybe the signage as well. And so as I'm going out and conducting my inspections, I can actually record the different observations that I'm making as well. So for example, if I find something pertaining to one of the signs, I can quickly mark that. Maybe I could say it's obscured or damaged. Priority, either give it a medium or high priority. I can add additional content to that as well, drop in some comments. And then we've got the mapping component. So right now it's pulling from my GPS location. Let's actually jump over to the airport. And let's say I've found I'm on this particular runway or close to this runway, and there's a sign that might be obscured right there. We'll just go ahead and click yes to that. If I wanted to, I could also capture a photo as well, and I will actually do that from my computer here. Oops, here we go. Here's the runway sign that is obscured without any kind of anything obscuring it. And then we'll go ahead and add the ending time of our inspection. Just go ahead and send that off. So that's going to go ahead and send off. And if I jump back into my dashboard, let's move into, see, what was it, the signage. And here it is, the new observation that I just recorded, along with the sign, along with the photo that I've just captured off of, in this case, off of my laptop. So an easy way to start to gain operational insight with respect to airfield inspections. And we've seen customers deploy Survey 123. We've seen them deploy these dashboards in different ways. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. customers can really configure this in a way that suits their needs, their business. Okay, so let's come back and let's actually take a look at how we would build one of these dashboards. Before we build one of the dashboards, let's take a look at this particular dashboard. And in one of our previous webinars that focused in on obstacle assessment, we looked at this. We went through the entire evaluation process for obstacles. So a company wants to build a cell tower, for example, they submit their application for that. This dashboard is allowing us to kind of monitor that process for all of the applications that we're receiving. In the upper left-hand corner, we've got the average duration of the evaluations. We've got metrics in terms of how we want to see the number of days we want to see these evaluations completed. We've got numbers that indicate those that have been constructed and need verification. New proposals, this is probably really important. So applications that have been submitted but that haven't actually started to go through the verification or the evaluation process. So effectively what we're going to do is actually create a dashboard very similar to this. So I'm going to jump back over to my dashboards tab and actually go ahead and create a dashboard. So we're going to call this demo obstacle dashboard. Give it a few tags. Obstacles, maybe ETOD, IKO, any number of tags that we want, and go ahead and create the dashboard. So it's going to create the template for us so we can actually start adding content. So it's an empty canvas at this point. And at the top, under this little drop down, I can start to add different controls to my dashboard. One of the primary controls is going to be the map, because this is going to drive a lot of the other controls that we're going to see within the dashboard. So let me start with the map first. And let's grab this obstacles proposal map. We can provide some functionality to the user, such as being able to switch the base map. Let's provide them the ability to actually see the legend and maybe zoom in, zoom out. So we've got our mapping component here. That's a good start. And then we have a number of other controls that we can add. So in the example I just showed you, we had a gauge. So let's go ahead and add a gauge to our dashboard. There's different styles of gauge that we can add as well. So if we go to the gauge, let's make it a meter, maybe a half donut. Come back to the data. We want to look at an average of the eval duration. So this is telling us the average amount of time, the average in number of days, how long it's taking to conduct these evaluations. And so we might have some targets in terms of, we want to make sure all of our evaluations are happening under 45 days as an example. So maybe what we can do is have a minimum value and a maximum value. We'll just leave it at 100. Come over to the general tab here. We can add some color to this as well if we'd like. Actually, I'm going to go back to the gauge. Let's add some guides. So this will kind of help us quickly identify if we're on target or if we're not on target with respect to our evaluation. So the first one, anything from 0 to 45 days, we'll say we're going to be in the green. So let's give it a nice green color. Let's add another one. So from 45 days out to, we'll say 75 days. Well, we're kind of in the orange, maybe a little bit darker orange. And then anything from 75 to 100, we'll consider that red. So we want to avoid that at all costs, make it a little bit more of a red. So just like that, we're able to create kind of this gauge. It's nice and big here, but we're not done creating some controls and some widgets here. So let's go in and add an indicator, which is simply the number. In this case, I want to pull from, simply do a count of the number of records that we have within our database that meet a certain criteria. So let's add a filter for this. This is going to be proposal status that is submitted. So again, these are all of the obstacle proposals that have been submitted, but nothing has been done with it. So these are the ones that we want to actually take action against. We'll go ahead and add this as well. And let's add one more control, which is going to be a chart. We're going to look at the proposal status. That way we can get an idea of the distribution of our proposals and kind of the different phases that they're in, whether they're constructed, they're in the process of being evaluated if some have been rejected and so forth. So with that, let's go ahead and take a look at the series. And let's go ahead and give it unique colors for each of the different categories. And then let's jump to the chart. I want to make this the orientation for the bar chart here horizontal. And then maybe the last one is actually make this a little bit interactive. So under the actions, we can actually influence what we see as far as the map is concerned as well. Let's start with that. So I've got a bunch of widgets that have been thrown into my dashboard, but no organization to this just yet. So I can start to drag and drop some of these controls around. Actually, let's move this here and maybe move our gauge to the top here. We'll just kind of make this a little bit cleaner. And then we've got our map. So just like that, we're able to create a dashboard. It is interactive. So for example, if I want to look at all of the approved proposals, I have access to that. If I want to look at those that have been constructed and verified, I have access to that as well. So that's really how we can quickly deploy some of these dashboards. Again, you saw me do absolutely no coding, just pulling from the data. We've authored a web map that we saw that, and then just started to tap into that web map to create these different controls and widgets to interact with the dashboard. Okay, so the next step that I'm going to take is actually creating a chart viewer. So we're going to actually use Web App Builder to create this. But before I get to that piece, what I want to show first is, look, in the last webinar, Nick took you through the creation process of an aeronautical chart. We've got an aeronautical chart, en route looking chart. We've kind of optimized this a little bit so we can actually publish it to the web. We've done things as far as scale dependencies, making sure that certain layers draw at certain scales, having the annotation of the labels draw at certain scales as well. Once we've authored our map, what we can do is actually start to share that content as a web service. And there's different ways you can share this content. And I'm taking you through this because it is important in terms of optimization and speed when you actually start to have users interact with it. So the layer types, for example, we've got a handful of layers in our map. We can either have it draw a map image or really work with the features dynamically so the users are interacting with the features. For speed's sake, I'm actually going to use the map image. And then there's different ways you can actually configure that map image. So either doing it dynamically from the data, meaning it's going to redraw the labels and try to position the labels, or again, for speed's sake, being able to use tiles from a cache. And then you can actually set the different scale levels of which you want to generate those tiles. I've already published this service to ArcGIS Enterprise in this case. So I'm going to switch over to an ArcGIS Enterprise site that I have. And this is the service that was actually published. I've actually added this to a web map. Let's go ahead and open up that web map. Now in the web map, you can see we've got, and all of our data is located in the Western US here. We've got the airports and navies that are shown at this one scale. As I zoom in, we're going to start seeing other data start to appear and show. And you can see it's pretty responsive. Again, that's because these are map images tiled as tiled cache images that we have that we're just pulling up. We can still actually identify and query the data as well. So I can see this particular airspace, the upper and lower limits of the airspace. So I have the ability to interact with the data and information that's contained within. So what I might want to do before I go any further is actually add some content to this particular map. So let's go ahead and add some data. Oops. In the Western US, there's a number of wildfires that are active. So I'll just add the wildfire data. You can see some points drop into the map here. Where I'm based out in Colorado, there should be some fires out here. But we've got fire data that we can add to the map. There's weather data that we can add to the map as well. I think I'm just going to save our map as it is right now. And then now that I have this content and this web map, I can actually start to share this out as a web application. So when I hit the share button, I've got the option here to create a web app. We have different templates that users can actually choose from in terms of creating their web application. I'm going to go straight to Web App Builder and build essentially an en route chart viewer. We already have our tags. Let's just go ahead and get started. So it's going to launch Web App Builder, basically kind of create the shell of what I'm going to be working with as far as this chart viewer. There's different themes I can choose from, such as a Dart theme that'll allow me to have all of my widgets at the bottom here. There's even a dashboard theme. I'm going to choose the foldable theme that allows me to have some widgets at the top here, as well as along the kind of the main title bar here as well. We've already got our maps. We don't need to choose a map. We can actually jump right into the widgets. But before doing that, there's also style. I can change the style. I can add my own branding to this. And you're going to see this in Hub as well as we go through and create a Hub site. So it is important to be able to add your own branding to these various sites. And we allow users to do that. So let's move into the widgets now. So with the widgets, I'm going to add a couple of widgets at the top here. We've got an entire gallery of widgets that we can add, and this allows our users to really interact with the data. So for example, I know we have a select widget. I'll just go ahead and select that. Say okay. How do we want our users to interact with it? In some cases, we might want them to actually export the data that they're selecting. We can even choose what data that they are allowed to export. So for example, maybe we only want them to export airport and nav aids. So we'll say okay to that. We've got our select that's been added. Let's go ahead and add a print widget as well. And we'll say okay. So we've now added a select and print. So if I choose my select, I can actually just come in and select some features. And if I go to the airports, I can actually export that to a GeoJSON, a CSV. Let's go ahead and export it to a GeoJSON and just open this up. Open it up in Notepad. Well, that's your GeoJSON. Not very human readable, but oftentimes that's used in other applications. You can certainly export out to a CSV as well. So let's go ahead and clear our selection. Maybe actually zoom in a little bit and maybe zoom in a little tighter and take a look at the print function as well. So with the print, we can actually go ahead and do just a simple print of what is on our screen here, or the map piece only. And just like that, it created a print, and we can easily create a PDF from that. Okay, just a couple more widgets that we're going to add. Let's actually look at adding some widgets to the control up here. Again, we might want the user to be able to switch the base map. Add that. We might want the user to actually add some additional data, for example. And then finally, maybe allow a user to, let's see, where is it? Do a measurement. So if they want to measure distances, area, things like that. And then we'll go over to the final tab here. Let's just drop the logo. If we wanted to add our logo, we can. Additional links along the top. If you think it's going to supplement information for the user, you can do that. So once we've created our chart viewer, we can simply save that and go ahead and launch it. And this will show us the experience that the user is going to have within the chart viewer. So again, we're going to notice things as far as control of the data, again, optimized for performance. So as I zoom out, less data is going to be displayed. As I zoom in, we're going to see more data labels start to show. Users can interact with this using the measurement tool. We can start to measure things, again, in distance, area, and so forth. And again, add data. So we might want to add weather data as an example. And we're actually going to go out to ArcGIS Online and look at maybe some radar data. And of course, nothing interesting in California. maybe nothing interesting across the US. Oh yeah, we've got lots of data or lots of weather happening central United States. But ultimately, that's how you can quickly deploy some of these types of applications. Again, you saw me deploy this chart viewer. We've seen examples of our customers doing this. Requires no coding at all, and it can be quite performant as well. Okay, so the last thing we're going to move on to is creating a hub site. Now, as I mentioned before, Hub is a fantastic way to really engage your stakeholders, providing metrics about certain elements, creating initiatives, creating access to resources that they might need. And all of this can be done, again, in an intuitive way to create a hub site that engages your community, that engages your stakeholders. And I'm going to pass it off over to Summer, who's actually going to take us through the steps of creating a hub site. And again, as part of the theme, you're not going to see any kind of coding as we create these different sites, these different applications. So with that, Summer, I think I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Cool. Okay. So Jonathan just showed you an example of a hub site, and you might be wondering how to put together your own. Hub is an easy to configure community engagement platform that you can that can help organize your data and tools. It's included in your ArcGIS Online and delivers data sharing and site creation capabilities. So I threw together this framework of a site to show you how easy it is to configure your own. So let's say you want to make a site with your organization's branding, some featured applications, data sets, and social media. Let's start by showing you the site editor. So every site includes a layout, configuration options, and a set of drag and drop cards so that you can share content in numerous ways, like Jonathan said, with no code required. So the main part here is this Customize tab. And from here, you can access different settings of your site, branding of the header, branding of the overall site in your theme tab, the layout with all of the different cards that you can drag and drop in, and then some footer configuration. So let's start with branding. Branding your site with your organization's logo and colors can help establish your content as trusted and authoritative. It can also help to kind of blend with your organization's existing websites. So let's start by adding in a logo. So I went into the header tab and I'm going to go into the branding tab. And I'm just going to bring in a URL of a logo that I have hosted on ArcGIS Online. And you'll see it'll show up there. You can also upload it as well. And then it gives you this option to include an alt text. So that is for accessibility. And whenever you understand like applying these principles to your web design, it can help you kind of support providing the best experience for everyone, whether or not they have some sort of situational, permanent, or temporary disability. So I'm going to go ahead and say aviation logo. So this will help whenever someone uses like a screen reader for your site. And then, so we have our logo looking good. I'm going to go into the menu tab and add in some menu links. So what I'm going to do is add a link to an external link, and I'm going to do the charting product page. I'm just going to copy that in. And as you can see, you can do an external link, a relative link, or a mail to link here. And you can also open the link in a new tab. And then I'm going to add in another link to our airports product. It's all pretty easy, just coming in and adding those. Perfect. And then you can also add in some social media icons to the right side of the header as well. So next, I'm going to go into the theme tab and really start to personalize my site for my branding colors. So the first thing I'm going to do is come in and copy a hex code of a color and bring it into this global nav background color, which is the very top right here. So I can change that, or I can use this picker here as well. And then I'm going to put that in my header background color as well. So we have a nice gray background. And then I'm going to change my header color to be white. And none of that required any coding. And then lastly, I'm going to bring in a red color for my buttons that you'll see later. Perfect. So to further carry out like the aviation theme of this site, I'm going to add in a banner image behind this text. And as you can see, this is a row, and that's pretty much the framework of the site that you're going to bring in. Every time you want to put in content, you can kind of section it off by row and give it like background colors and images or anything you want. So I'm going to actually upload an image that I have on my computer. You can just drag it in. Perfect. And then I'm going to give it a 30% transparency just to give it kind of like a faded look. And then since my background color is black, it gives like a nice, like more faded, not so like out there look of that. And so now that I have the header and the image set up, I'm going to put a little narrative in this row for my site to kind of explain like what it is. So I'm going to drag a text card into this empty row. And I'm actually going to give this a background color to match my header, just to further carry out the theme. Let me paste that in here. And then my text color is already white, so that's perfect. And then I'm going to go back into this text card by clicking this little tool, spinny guy. And then I'm going to paste in some text that I already have. Perfect. And I can actually change the size of it from here because this is a rich text editor. And I can make it bold or italic or put in hyperlinks. So cool. We have a pretty good starting point as far as branding goes. So let's add in some of our existing content. And there are a few ways that we can go about doing this, but I'm going to start by using a gallery card and hooking it up to a group of featured applications that I have already set up. But first, I'm going to start sectioning off each one of these rows. And I'm going to do that by bringing in another text card here. And then I'm going to name this section. So I'm going to call it Featured Applications. And then I'm going to make it a little bit bigger and make it bold. And add in this little line here. And then I'm going to drag in the gallery card. So there are two different ways you can go about doing this. You can dynamically add in data by using groups, tags, or categories that you already have set up in ArcGIS Online, or you can manually put in ones from not just your content, but your organization and also anything that's publicly shared in ArcGIS Online. But like I said, I'm going to go ahead and select a group that I set up in my organization. And then I'm going to make sure I include all apps, dashboards, story maps, maps, and data sets. And then I'm going to make it show 7 cards. And then you can kind of go into some more sorting and sharing stuff. But next I'm going to go into the appearance and kind of style these a little bit. So I'm going to make it rounded corners and then give it a medium drop shadow and include buttons. And that's where that color that I set up in my theme comes in. And as you can see, I styled it using no code at all, and it looks pretty sleek. But you can see that these are all pointing to items in your ArcGIS Online. And by adding a description and a thumbnail, you can have a really nice looking gallery. And this is kind of a great way to highlight content that I already have. So next, I'm going to just add in one application. So maybe I just want to highlight one application I have, like a dashboard. And I can do that by using this iframe card. First, I'm going to drag in my text card and name this featured dashboard. And do the same thing that I did to the other heading, just to make it all cohesive. And then I'm going to drag in the iframe card. And all I have to do is give it a URL to embed in a dashboard. So there it was. So I'm going to paste that in. And as you can see, it pops up. And if you want to create a more mobile-friendly site, you can enable mobile URL override. So if someone's on a small device, you can give it a URL to a mobile version of this dashboard that will come up, or you can hide it altogether. So this is looking a little squished, so I'm going to come into the appearance and give it a bigger height. And that looks better. Perfect. So next, I'm going to set up a category search of my data sets. So what if you had people coming in that only wanted to access a certain data set that you have set up by tagging that data or giving it categories that you've already configured in ArcGIS Online? So what I'm going to do is use this category card. Let me drag in my text box again and name this Explore Data. And do the same thing for this one. All pretty easy to make it look the same. And then I'm going to drag in a category card. And so what I'm going to do here is there's 3 different ways you can go about using this. You can use a tag query, which is what I'm going to do. You can use category query, or you can use a group like I did with the gallery above. So I'm going to look for everything tagged with airport. And then I'm going to come in here and change this link text to say airports. And then I'm going to go into the gallery of icons that Esri provides and look for this airplane icon. And then I can kind of change up the color. If I wanted to change it to that gray or red color that I set in my theme, I could do that. But this looks pretty good to me. So what if you have an icon of your own that you don't have in the icon gallery? Well, we can actually give it a URL. And what I've done here is just uploaded another image to ArcGIS Online. So I'm going to use a tag query to look up navaids or navaid, and then name it navaid, and then provide a URL for my own icon. Copy that in here. And then I have my own little custom icon here that was pretty easy. Just need to post it on ArcGIS Online and share it publicly, and you can get a sharing URL, which you can use here. And lastly, I'm going to link to some real-time Twitter feeds from ICAO and Eurocontrol. And all I'm going to need is the URL to their Twitters. So I'm going to drag in a text card and name this social media. And then using the social media card, I can copy the Twitter URL here and paste it in. And you can also do Facebook if you wanted to. And I'm going to give it a dark theme and show the footer. And then I'm going to drag in another social media card and paste in the URL to Eurocontrol's timeline and match that up there just by clicking this button. I can kind of style it and make it look nice. And that is how you can use drag and drop features combined with your existing and external content to put together a really simple hub site that can enable, third parties to come in and access your data that's nice and organized. Yeah, I'll pass it back to you, Jonathan.
Great, thank you, Summer. That was fantastic. I think what you showed was the ability to quickly stand up a site that is impactful for aviation organizations. We're starting to see airports start to deploy hub sites, starting to see civil aviation authorities, air navigation service providers exploring this, deploying these types of applications as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, come back, and just to kind of wrap things up, and then we're going to move into the Q&A. So again, just as far as what you saw, there was quite a bit in terms of some of the apps, airfield inspections or airport inspections. These, largely what we saw was the dashboard, the ability to kind of feed that dashboard with applications like Survey 123, looked at how we could configure a dashboard very easily and quickly. How do we stand up an aeronautical chart viewer, whether it's an en route chart viewer or even a VFR chart viewer as some of our other customers, and then again what hub. So the reason that we take you through these different deployable apps, because it is about providing access to your organization's authoritative content, really kind of bringing a little bit more insights into the data, bringing access to your stakeholders, to your users, whether it's internal, external. So all of those are really important, and it's really kind of taking your organization to the next step, and really leveraging the investment that's been made in the data, because we see a lot of organizations that are spending a lot of time in developing out their aeronautical information, whether like a CAA and developing their AIM system, or even an airport and their airport database and operations database. So being able to really tap into that and provide some insights into those into that data is really important. So I think with that, what we can do is I'm going to bring Kiyoshi up to kind of the virtual stage here and kind of walk us through any questions that we may have received.
Sure. Thanks, Jonathan. Hello, everyone. We do have a couple questions that have come in. We'll start going through those. And again, if anything comes up as we're discussing, feel free to enter those questions into the chat. There's a little drop down that lets you choose to send question to staff, and it'll show up in our list here. So I think first I'll kind of just go through the list as they came through. Jonathan, this one's probably for you first. We showed, I think, on one of your slides an example of Inair's volcano app. Can you talk a little bit more about some of the other agencies and entities we've worked with outside the U.S., some of the international groups?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it's best if I maybe switch over to our ArcGIS Online. So this is actually a public-facing site, and we highlight some of our customers' work here. And so we do have in there, we've highlighted a couple of their applications. One is the volcanic ash application that I mentioned. They also have what they call Insignia, which is kind of their AIS charting viewer, if you will. So what Aner has done is kind of transitioned away from producing some of their charts as in the traditional AIP and have elected to push that information into online viewing applications. So that's one example. I think LVNL in Netherlands, they have their own version of a chart viewer as well. It's about providing access to some of their important content. So there's a number of different applications that we're seeing kind of across the globe in which our users are starting to stand up, whether it's a viewer, whether it's an interactive application. I think in Latvia, they've developed something really interesting there. I can't say that that is all just straight up configuration. I think there was some coding involved using the JavaScript API, but they were able to integrate a 2D and 3D experience within that single application to view really in a drone context. Where is it safe to fly drones? So again, this is a great way to start pushing that information out to your user community more broadly.
Great, thank you. The next question is more about on the airport side of things. So if an organization has mapped their signs, could that data appear in our inspection application, kind of based on our location for the inspection? So I guess in other words, can the solution sort of use your location and the sign data to, to help with selection and things like that?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. You can absolutely use any of the mapped signage information within that Survey 123, and there are ways and techniques within the Survey 123 form that you can have it use your location to select or even to kind of populate some of the elements within the form itself. So for example, if I'm conducting my inspection, I'm on a particular runway, I can have it look at that my location, and if it's within the boundaries of the runway, it can automatically populate some of that information for me. So I don't have to type in, okay, I'm on runway 16 right, for example.
Great. And the process there basically would be to publish your sign data as a feature service, so you could consume it with those apps you're configuring. Is that correct?
Right. You could publish that as part of one of the base maps that you are providing to the user in that Survey 123 form.
Okay, perfect.
And you could even extend that even further if, with some of the webhooks to tie it into other kind of third-party systems for asset management, work order management as well. And we've seen customers actually do that, and they've create kind of this seamless user experience with transitions from collecting information for inspections to actually generating work orders for other staff to come out. And so if there's a light bulb that's out on the taxiway, they can dispatch the work appropriately.
Right. So going beyond just signs and even publishing, your light features, your pavement markings, all sorts of different. Great. Excellent. Next question, I think we can kind of address it at a high level. It's a sort of a specific case, but with someone who's working with an airport to kind of do this transition from traditional CAD data to GIS data, with the goal in mind of starting to make use of some of our Esri apps, specifically to facilitate Part 139 inspections. At a high level, do you have any kind of good tips, best practices, things we can kind of throw out there to help with the transition?
Yeah, right. I think the first part is leveraging the information model that's a part of ArcGIS Aviation Airports extension and solution. So with that extension, there is an airports data model that's built on the FAA's 18D specification. So you mentioned Part 139 for our international customers. That is a US-based regulation for really for airports operating under certain environments. And so Part 139, doing Part 139 inspections, that's in many ways equivalent to some of the Annex 14 operations manual that you might see. Really, it's about conducting airfield inspections. And we have a information model that's a part of the airport solution, which actually is a great foundation. And almost I would say it's an essential foundation. So what you'd probably want to do is look at mapping that data from CAD that you already have into that information model. that has all of the elements that are necessary for all the critical and non-critical features at an airport. And so that gives you a good foundation to really extend that into conducting your inspections as well.
Great, and I did drop a link to that product page in the chat there, so that the folks have that available to them.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so let's see. Another question here, kind of a quick one would be: I know, I noticed we put you added the weather data to the web app you were building in the demonstration. Is there other types of data that can be incorporated into web apps or dashboards, specifically things like maybe aircraft feeds or real-time data, things like that?
Yeah, and we've seen that specifically with the aircraft feeds, pulling that information in. So any kind of real-time data you can pull in. If you're publishing services, so some web mapping services, some web feature services, we can include that into some of these web maps. And it's really these web maps that drive the functionality, the behavior of these applications. So whether it's a dashboard, whether it's some of these viewers that we're seeing, developed or not developed, but configured through Web App Builder. So again, as long as it's there's services that you're publishing, we can actually tap into those services, the REST endpoint, and really start to work with it and do some interesting things with the data. So it may not be just viewing it, but how do we conduct real-time analysis with it as well?
Okay, great, thank you. Let me just peek here. A couple others in the queue here, just a few. Let's see. Is it possible to build story maps in ArcGIS Enterprise? Is there a particular extension that's needed? So I think we've sort of seen it in ArcGIS Online, but is that functionality available in Enterprise as well? Yeah.
So I've kind of showed it, and it may have been subtle, but I actually showed a couple of working within the ArcGIS Online and then working within ArcGIS Enterprise. The user experience is almost identical in terms of the interface, in terms of how you organize some of your content and create some of the content. And so I think in this particular question so I'm looking at my enterprise portal right now, and I have access to the story maps as well. So if I go into the story maps, I'm accessing content that's stored within enterprise. And how you would actually access that is through your organization, finding the user and then making sure, let's see, I don't think we have many users here, but look for me, for example, I could manage the add-on licenses. If I come down here, these are the applications that you would actually see in that menu list. And you'll notice that story maps is in here somewhere.
It might be one of
it's a part of the essential apps that's, yep.
So yeah, I'll go ahead and put a link to the some documentation on story maps in the chat as well. And I think that site will talk a little bit about how it's accessed. I believe it's managed through the user types. So it may be it's in the app button. So certain user types will have access to that app. But you can find that information on the site that I linked to there.
Right. We even have a storyteller user type as well.
Right.
That would certainly provide access to that.
Great.
Okay.
Another high-level question here. Let's see, can you link enterprise data to Hub? Maybe this is one Summer can help us with as our kind of resident Hub expert. But is it possible to incorporate? We sort of showed again adding data from ArcGIS Online groups and things to the Hub. Is it possible to incorporate stuff that's published through Enterprise?
Yeah, so the way that works is in Enterprise, there's a thing called Enterprise Sites, which is pretty much the same thing as Hub, depending on like what version of Enterprise you have. The newer versions will have pretty much identical site editor as Hub. But yeah, I think it would fall in what we were just talking about, having that like essential apps bundle where you'll have enterprise sites available to you. But yeah, enterprise sites, pretty much the same thing as Hub, just built on that enterprise, environment.
Okay, great, thank you. I think that's about it. So I'll turn it back over to you, Jonathan.
Yeah, thank you. So that's going to conclude this webinar in the series. Again, it is about adding insights into the information that you're already collecting and managing within your aeronautical information system or airport database. You know, as we conclude this webinar, you're actually going to be presented with a couple of questions. We do ask that you would answer those survey questions. Just 2 questions. It'll be really quick, easy, and that'll provide us some insights in terms of some of the future webinars and the direction that we want to take with our future webinars. So with that, we really appreciate everybody's time, and we hope that you all have a good rest of the day or evening wherever you are.